on the agenda is the approval, thank you, Vic. Approval of the minutes for the April 6th, 2023.
So moved.
I'm gonna try this. There we go. See how that.
Okay, second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, team. Okay, thank you. So the next item is the animal control update. So come on up here. Let us know how that's going. All right.
Good evening, council members. Assistant Chief Patty Richards from the Police Department here representing Chief Thomas, who's unavailable. From the Police Department standpoint, the contract is going amazingly well. The officers are very happy with it. We're getting response when we're requesting it. Insight when we have a question, they're picking up the phone, they're answering questions and everything else like that for us. And it's been a very good partnership. And definitely one we want to continue. It's been a benefit to both sides of things. I brought Nathan Miller, who is our designated animal control officer from CARES, and he can tell you a little bit about what's gone on for the last almost a year.
Hi, I'm Nathan Miller, designated animal control officer for the city of Des Moines on behalf of CARES. Yeah, I'm just going to give you an update of what's going on since we signed the contract on June 15th. So, animal intake from the signing of the contract to about a week ago when I created this. As you can see, we've taken in 80 dogs, 90 cats. The 6 others are some goats, a couple birds. So it's a little bit of craziness. For a total of 176. Enforcement, we've been fairly active. We've had 83 cases. Those constitute welfare checks, animal abuse, animals running at large, injured animals, and of course dog bites. We've had 10 after-hours 911 calls for emergencies, and we've responded to Des Moines PD for calls for assist 8 times. Yes?
Can we ask?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just what's the difference between an animal running at large, which would be enforcement, versus the animals that in the first slide that you've taken into the shelter?
So, animals running at large would be also involved. So if I go and pick up an animal, we can take it at the shelter, so that would be covered under that as well.
Okay. So not a big distinction between the two. One's sort of a subset of the other.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to show you shelter totals as well as enforcement totals.
Thank you.
Okay. Community outreach, stuff we've done in the area. We were part of the Waterland Parade last year. We'll be in the Waterland Parade again. We have participated in the farmers market with the dog days. We'll be there again. Probably doing another free microchipping event during that day. We did hold one on April 1st. We had 36 animals microchipped. I believe it was 31 dogs and 5 cats in that total. And as you see at the bottom there, we do have 2 more free events planned, one for the summer, which will probably be the dog days, and then another one in the fall. And that's pretty much it.
Wow.
Any questions?
Good work.
So yeah, so I saw recently where a lot of the shelters are seeing a large intake of surrendered animals. Have you been experiencing that as well?
Correct. We get probably 5-6+ calls a day for people trying to surrender animals from the entire region, not specifically just Des Moines or just Burien. We're only contracted to take animals from those 2 cities, but we did several calls or emails every single day about that.
Okay.
We call it the COVID bump. When COVID happened, a lot of people were working from home and decided they wanted a companion animal while they were working from home. Now they have to go back to work, and unfortunately they feel that they can no longer take care of those animals. So.
Yeah, that's too bad, but you know, but thank you for what you're doing and the work and the outreach and that. It's been great to have your level of service, so thank you.
Thank you.
Great community engagement. I really appreciate microchipping. Great, great work. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a great partnership.
Good,
Yeah.
good. Glad to hear it.
And Nathan's really truly become a part of the department. He comes in, people aren't afraid to ask him questions. When we were doing some of our reaccreditation stuff, he was right in there helping us get stuff ready and everything else like that. So he's truly has become part of the department in that respect.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nathan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. So we're kind of looking at addressing a potential future problem. It's not something we're currently dealing with to a large degree. But we're looking at drafting an ordinance that would prohibit camping on city-owned property. We currently have a ordinance that prohibits camping in public parks. And we also have rules about right-of-ways, which would be your sidewalks, that you can't obstruct them. But we don't have anything in our code about, we own some sensitive area tracts, we own some property that just has never been developed as a park, that we haven't designated as a park. We own City Hall, where we don't have any ordinances that would give us an enforcement mechanism to address camping, homeless encampments, essentially. And so what we're looking at is a proposal for this discussion with the committee to bring forward an ordinance that would prohibit camping on all city-owned property. This isn't as simple as just saying you can't camp on city property. There was a Ninth Circuit Court decision, Martin versus the City of Boise, that the Supreme Court looked at and declined to hear. So that's now the law of the land, that you can't prohibit camping on public property unless the person has a place to go. You'd essentially be making it illegal to exist and subjecting somebody to arrest if you said, you have to leave here, but there's not a shelter available. You can't go anywhere. So you're essentially just going to get arrested. So the court said that's illegal. The court said that in order to move people, in order to prohibit camping on public property, there has to be shelters available at no cost. And so what we are working on is putting together an ordinance that would have basically state that it's illegal to camp on city-owned property, but then there's exceptions. And the exceptions would be if you are experiencing homelessness, and there is no overnight shelter available on that date, then they could stay at the moment. Additionally, we'd include some exceptions if camping was permitted by the city manager, and that might just be we're having some sort of event and we're allowing overnight camping, or some organization is saying, hey, we want to do this overnight thing at some city facility, can we do it? So we would, we'd write that in there. We would also define what available overnight shelter means, and that would be in order to comply with this Boise case. It has to be fairly close. It doesn't have to be in Des Moines. I've looked at some other cities. They define it either as the county, so we could say King County. We might be able to include Pierce County as well because we're fairly close. But if we're talking about outside city limits, we'd probably want to include that there's shelter available and we are providing transportation free of cost. We can't just say, oh, there's a place in Everett, you got to go, right? We'd have to provide them with the transportation. And then at that point we could say, we've provided you with transportation, we've provided you with the opportunity for shelter tonight, you can't stay here. And then that would essentially allow us to move forward to the next step. We would also write in there that we would consider shelter to be available if we have a place for them to go, we have transportation, but the place won't take them because they're either intoxicated or they're unruly. We would consider that enough to say, you can't stay here. You can't continue to camp here. it's not our fault that you're being taken to the shelter and they're not letting you in because of certain actions that you're taking, right? That can't be an excuse. And we would work that into the code. And then also, if there are restrictions, let's say there's a family that's camping, and we said, okay, well, we have shelter for the mother and the kids, but they don't allow men in the shelter, right? And that's something that some shelters do. That would not be considered sufficient to force them to leave, because we'd have to provide a shelter for everybody. You can't just split the family up. So that would be something that we would add in there. Because we would have these, we have our rule, we have our exceptions that comply with the law of the land. At that point, we can then impose penalties. So we would propose making it a misdemeanor for camping on city property. If you're not willing to leave, at that point, they could be subject to arrest. And they could also be subject to a trespass admonishment, which would then allow the city to, if they return to the property, they wouldn't even need to be camping at that point. They've just been trespassed, so they could be arrested at that point. So that's kind of in a nutshell what this camping ordinance would do. And I think part of this was inspired by, well, there's other cities that have these ordinances. We don't have it. And there's kind of some different takes on it, but they're essentially, there's a lot of the same provisions. The city of Burien is dealing with this right now. They don't have this ordinance. They had an encampment that moved from one location to a city-owned piece of property. They can't do anything about it. It's been a kind of a major issue in the community, and their hands are kind of tied at this point. So the thought would be to institute something like this that is compassionate, allows the city to provide people with available shelter, transportation to that shelter, but then at the same time have the ability to clear public land. So that would be, if the committee were to give the direction, we would draft this up and bring it forward. There was one other thing that I noted when I was looking at some of these different codes. We have no camping in city parks. That's already on the books. So, and that's basically overnight. You can't. The park closes at dusk. At that point, you can't just sleep in the park. You can't loiter there after dark. But if you were to set up a tent during the day and stay there during the day, there's been some issues with law enforcement approaching tents, not being able to see what's inside, or city staff, approaching, not being able to see what's inside. And then there's been safety risk about, do you look inside and now you're exposing yourself to, maybe somebody with a weapon, somebody that, maybe they're just trying to protect their tent, but it's a dangerous situation. So I've seen some codes where if you're going to set up a tent in a city park during the day, the tent has to be transparent on two sides to allow, kind of a visual inspection of what's inside, which, if that's something that the committee wanted to do, we could add that to our parks rule too, about camping in parks and tents in parks. It just seemed like if you're in a public park, that I don't know. I mean, what's going on in the tent, right?
So would that be like if, you have an all-day event like the concerts in the park or some of those things like that, and even those tents would have to be, you'd have to be open and visible? In terms of if folks are setting them up to have some shelter, to get out of the sun as they're listening to music, does that?
Yeah, I mean, that to me, that would be like a covering, right? But this is more like camping tents.
Right, and so what I'm saying is if they bring a camping tent to that event to put their things in, or maybe have their kids sleep in there as they're hanging out during the day, again, would that fall under that same rule of it having to be open so that you could see in there?
Probably with a strict reading of the code, yes. I mean, we could look at maybe one side, or if the committee's not interested in that piece,
No, I'm interested in making sure that our law enforcement folks are as safe as possible. And so, and it is going into something blind I mean, you look at what happens in a lot of different events, and that's where people get killed. Our law enforcement does. So however we write this, just so that there's some clear interpretation, and I know that there's also, you know, they make some judgment, I guess, give them some latitude to make some judgment on that, but not so that we get ourselves in some sort of legal jeopardy. You know, you're treating this group this way and this group a different way. So as long as we're consistent and fair as we go through that.
Yeah, and
With their safety at the utmost.
I think the rationale on this would be as if an officer, a code enforcement officer, or our mental health teams saw some tents in a park during the daytime, they're probably not going to want to wait till the nighttime to go investigate this, to say, hey, you can't have your tent here because now it's past dark. So they'd want to approach the tents during the daytime, and then, you know, having them, you know, with tarps and stuff and not being able to see inside, you know, it could create a risk, right?
So what's the solution if that happens? So let's say it's written into the code that the tents must be fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But they're not. So what's the solution? You approach the situation, it's down at the beach park, there's 4 tents set up and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, and now you can't see through them. So do you call out to the owners of the tents and say these structures are not allowed in the park because they're...
Yeah, so I mean, at that point, it's
code enforcement?
it would be, well, it would be an infraction, as a violation of our parks code. So, but most tents have the, you know, the,
Flap
yeah, so you could just, I mean, if it's, you know, someone that just,
is having their kids take a nap at
Yeah.
Bruce,
yeah,
and it's just a flap.
Yeah, I was gonna ask whether the flap that unzips and just has a mesh piece there, which a lot of camping tents, at least the bigger ones, almost universally have that. Is that sufficient?
Yes.
For transparency?
Yeah.
Okay. And I had one other question.
Yeah, go ahead, I have one too,
Yeah,
so
is
but I'm
it-
gonna let you go first.
Can we make a distinction between developed city property and undeveloped city property? Under this, for example, I have no desire to see any camping in the courtyard out here in front, sorry. But I don't know if we can do that under Boise versus, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't remember the whole name of it. If we were to say that we have undeveloped city land that's available, if you want to go camping, you have nowhere else to go, can we make that trade-off? I don't know.
Well, yes. I mean, under Boise, Martin v. Boise, we can prohibit camping on all city property as long as there's shelter space available. And so, under this, the city manager could issue permits for camping on city property. You know, I probably wouldn't recommend it. You know, the problem with our undeveloped land, you know, a lot of that we own is we own it because it was dedicated to us because it's a critical area. I mean, this will be areas, you know, when you
If
build a
it's
development,
519 or some of that 519.
yeah, or a
area.
wetland or something like that that's dedicated as part of a plat back to the city. But then it becomes kind of this area where people can congregate and stay. But the whole point was to protect that area. And a lot of times it's areas like and I think we've seen up on Pacific Highway across from that Fred Meyer, there's kind of that wooded area that's had a lot of problems. And so there can't be a lot of development up there because it's wetlands, right? But if you're allowing camping back there, then you're really kind of destroying the environment in those places.
And it's not necessarily that you might allow it in that area because the same rule would apply.
Yeah.
But again, we draw a broader or more absolute rule for developed city property, like around City Hall, back in the parking lot back here. just says no, no camping.
No, because the Boise case is gonna apply everywhere. Yeah, on city-owned property. Private property owners, you know, I mean, at that point, you're trespassing, but, public property, we can't prohibit people from being there unless we can provide them with shelter space. And we do have it. We have, I mean, we support organizations through our human services. There are agencies in Des Moines, there are agencies in King County that we work with, and that's what our mental health teams do. You know, they refer people all the time, and they have transportation options, and they move them off private property. And we're just trying to look out for a situation where there's a city-owned lot or some sort of property that now becomes this hot spot, and we're saying, well, we can't really do anything because we don't have a mechanism. So this would be that mechanism.
Yeah, if I have a couple of questions. So, on the transport, who does the transport to the shelter? If they have their own vehicle and you know, you make the arrangements for them and they can obviously drive themselves, but if they can't, who does the transporting?
So there's not, I think we'd have a lot of options. You know, our police might be able to talk to this, but if they wanted to, the officer could drive them. Our community service, our CSO, or our GPS team, or we could just get them a taxi.
And I'm thinking some of these are probably after hours, so you know, you have your code enforcement, your CSOs that work, I think, a day shift position, and so if you've got, you know, after hours transports, you know, I'm just wondering how that would get addressed. And I know there are some things that are available, but certainly I wouldn't want to take an officer out of service to go to Pierce County or downtown Seattle.
Yeah.
Or east side somewhere.
And I would imagine that a lot of this enforcement would be, it would be a CSO meeting at the site saying, hey, you know, this is city property, we need you to find somewhere else to go. And then it's kind of a process, right? Because sometimes, I mean, if they have belongings there and all that, so it's not an immediate, like, you have 5 minutes to get up to leave here, but it's, you know, it could be over 2 or 3 contacts. And then at that point, we'd have the time to arrange for if they needed a van or something like that.
Okay.
So I would, like, even with what's going on in Burien, it wouldn't be something that would just, if they were to adopt this, that they'd be able to implement it right. It would be and we have a process now, even for private property, where we'll make several contacts.
So a couple other questions. The library, that's a county-owned building, county property. Is that exempt from this being in the city of Des Moines, or do they have? I'm sure King County has some of their own ordinances on camping, but certainly Burien is you know, they were
So this
outside of that building. So
this is specific to city-owned property, and so obviously camping is allowed at Saltwater State Park, but you have to pay. But that's state property, so we don't have to worry about that in here. This is just specific to city-owned property. So this wouldn't apply to any property owned by PSC or Sound Transit or any.
County library.
Yeah, exactly. So they would have their own procedures, and I'm sure we work with them now, I imagine.
okay. And you were talking about city-owned property. It comes to mind the sidewalks up along Pacific Highway South and Kent Des Moines Road in particular. The one business owner that has people that camp out on the sidewalk in front of his business, in front of the door. So that includes all of these sidewalks, not the private part of the sidewalk, but certainly all the public sidewalks.
Yeah, so this would include all city property. We already have, so in our right-of-way code, we have rules against obstructing right-of-ways. So currently we have the ability to remove encampments or any sort of, you know, activity that's taking place that's in the right-of-way. Unless, if you want to spend time in the right-of-way, you need a permit, and that's existing.
Okay.
So what this is really focused on is city-owned property that's not a park and that's not a right-of-way.
All right, okay. And then one last question. You mentioned trespassing, just for some clarity, our businesses have the ability to have the police department trespass people from their businesses and because of some problems, you know, that maybe they've had. So what the city would be doing is exercising their right to trespass folks, the same as what we give the opportunity to private-owned businesses and to trespass.
Yeah, so we would be, if you're breaking the law on a specific piece of property that's city-owned, you would be subject to arrest, and you would then be trespassed from that property.
And that's the same if you were a business owner that you had the city trespass somebody on your behalf, or you trespassed somebody that was causing problems, and the police would show up and could arrest them if they didn't leave. Correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So we're consistent with what the private sector does in terms of city-owned properties.
If you're breaking the law, yes.
Yeah, if you're breaking the law.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So, that's great. Couple questions. So, back to the face-to-face meeting. Initially, you talked a little bit about if the person was unruly, if there's a mental health issue going on, and a shelter won't take this person, is there recourse there? Or like, does it have to get to the place where they're dangerous, or can you address that? Or is this a police question?
Well, I guess it kind of depends. If under this code we can't remove somebody from city property unless they have a place to go.
Okay.
So if we said, hey, we have a place to go, we can give you a ride, they're willing to have, they have a bed for you, and we take them there, and the place won't accept them because they're heavily intoxicated and they're violent, right? At that point, we can say, well, you can't return to the city property, okay? Because we gave you the opportunity. And I don't know if there's, there might be an opportunity at that point to try to seek some sort of commitment or something like that. But if we were to take them to the facility and the facility said, we don't have a bed for you, but the person is, they're not intoxicated, they're not being
Violent.
yeah. So at that point, we essentially have to take them back to the property and say, you could stay there until we can find a place for you.
Okay.
Yeah. So really it's if we have a place that's willing to take the person, but the place won't take them because of something that this individual is doing, at that point we've done what we can do, and they can't return to the property.
Okay. Then in a little bit, segue from what Councilmember Pennington was talking about, like the different kinds of camping situations on private property. It seems like there is a line between allowing somebody to camp in your yard if you decide to do that, and then a zoning violation. So can you speak to that for a moment? There's a line somewhere, right?
Yeah, so I mean, unauthorized camping, if you had a large field or something and people were camping there that you weren't allowed, then you could trespass them because at that point they're trespassing on your property. If you are allowing
Let's say you're a church and you've got a field next door and you decide you're gonna open up a camp.
Yeah,
people.
so we have a homeless encampment ordinance.
Okay.
And so in order to do that, you would have to meet all of the rules. And that was something we adopted 4 or 5 years ago. And that involves public noticing. You have to have the right kind of sanitation. You have to be close enough to transportation. And there was all sorts of kind of guidelines in place so that you don't have, a public health disaster and you're not, causing, some sort of danger to the neighborhood. So we have those rules in place. If somebody just had a large lot and decided to open it up for a number of campers or, you know, tents or whatever, that, yes, we would have a we'd have zoning issues.
Okay,
And so that would be a little bit of it'd be different enforcement, but there are enforcement mechanisms.
okay. That's all I had, along with these two. So what you need from us is an okay, please move forward with this or no. So I would be in favor of moving forward.
Yeah, I'm in favor of moving forward, and I think ultimately, the goal is to, there's part of the outreach to folks, and that's part of, you know, the period of time that you try to get them into services and try to provide them in a direction that you know, hopefully changes their life for the better, or into some sort of rehab or some sort of service that's gonna help them. And I think that's, at the end of the day, this is another tool for our enforcement folks to help maybe change somebody's life for the positive. So I'm in favor of it.
Yeah, and I agree. I think moving forward is the right thing to do here. And the idea that this is a tool that allows us to redirect them into a more positive environment than trying to survive on their own in a tent somewhere, that's a good thing. And so hopefully that's the way it plays out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, do you need anything else from
No,
us?
we'll
then?
put together a draft and then we'll get it on an agenda
Okay,
for the full council.
all right, thanks.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Okay, well, the next item on the agenda is a flock camera update. Assistant Chief Cooley.
Hello,
Hi.
council. Good evening. Yes, so flock safety cameras, I think presentation was some time ago. These are license plate reader cameras that are really enhanced, so a license plate does not have to be attached to the vehicle. It'll have different search parameters. I'm happy to report that 8 of the eventual 16 cameras are operational. And the cities of Kent and Tukwila also have these cameras in operation. We're able to network with those as well. We are in touch with this company weekly, so we expect that all 16 cameras will be operational by about the first week of June. The current operational cameras are located at Marine View near 216th, Marine View near 227th, on 24th near 214th, which is near the FAA building, 216th near Pack Highway, Pack Highway near 216th, Pack Highway near the Red Lion, Pack Highway near McDonald's, and then 16th near 272nd. And so these are really an amazing force multiplier. In fact, just before coming into the meeting, you can set it to where it'll text or email you, for example, a stolen vehicle or a missing person. And I received a message of a stolen vehicle passing a camera down on Marine View. So amazing technology, and it's moving right ahead. And then lastly, on flock cameras, just with those 8 operational cameras, it's already read over 500,000 license plate reads. And we've conducted 205 where we're searching for a particular plate or vehicle. And on 128 occasions, a stolen vehicle or stolen plate or wanted went past one of the cameras, just in probably the last week or so.
Wow, I'm taking notes.
Yeah, I mean, I do think this is a good force multiplier, and I like the idea that it's only reading license plates. So it preserves an element of privacy for the people who are in the car, rather it's just looking at the car, which is already a publicly displayed piece of information. My son on his way to work or school the other day noticed it at 216 or at 16th and 272, and snapped a picture of it while he was stopped at the light. He said, "Dad, what's this?" And nobody knew until I finally just sent the picture to Chief Thomas. So,
yeah, it's in our community report the chief puts out. In fact, came out today. But in fact, you might remember there was a homicide right near that location that this camera would have been instrumental, in my opinion, in solving. So I actually arrived at that while the person was still laying on the sidewalk. So we really have high hopes. I think Kent, Tukwila, other cities, Liberty Lake, Yakima, Grandview, Centralia, a lot of cities are using this technology, so.
Well, and I don't know if you know this, but in Atlanta, where they recently had a mass shooting at a hospital, which left one fatality, part of how they found the guy is he had stolen a car, and that showed up several miles away, but they were able to they got the car and had zeroed in on where he was. So, you know, it really does make a huge difference.
But I think it's great. You know, look forward to some of the other reports. That's a pretty amazing, 500,000 cars in what, you said a week that they've been up, week and a half?
Just a little more than a week. It's
Yeah.
just, the volume that goes by. Of course, I mean, it could be the same car, obviously, zipping back and forth.
Right, but then the fact that it's already picked up some cars that are being wanted for certain crimes, and that's cool. That's
Yes.
good.
It's amazing. Great. I did have one more question. If you have a short little update on how the camera situation's working out down in Redondo.
Yes, so we do. So that's a different company that operates the speed cameras, and it's the same company that currently is contracted by the city to operate the red light enforcement and school zone cameras. We communicate with them weekly. The company was actually reviewing the project today, and late today, and so once we receive word from the company, we believe we'll be able to move forward with a tentative installation date by June 1st. And the company is aware that this is a priority, as well as the other company, Flock Safety, and implementing those other 8 Flock cameras.
Just a note, sorry. I just got a message from Ken. He said everything was approved today on the company end.
Late breaking news?
Yeah, they're working on drafting the amendment, and they should have the draft to us by next week.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah, they just
might
got this.
not- I'm probably on that
I
email.
think you are. I just got it about 30
Tim,
minutes ago.
this is the Redondo cameras?
Yes.
Okay.
So we were waiting on approval from the company that was they do viability studies. They're not going to put their equipment in. It's really expensive equipment unless they're sure that the municipality is going to, if there's enough potential for
Activity.
violations. So they looked at the information, and apparently they believe that there's a speeding problem,
Down.
or at least there's it's viable. So
See,
we'll-
I had left my phone on mute and wanted to focus on the council. I left my phone right over there. So the message is probably
I was
on.
reading my phone when I was up here.
Yeah.
and no, that's so we should have
Good
that moving
news.
forward soon.
All right.
Good
thank you.
news.
There
Thank
you
you,
have
Tim. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for the report. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Great. Well, the next item on the agenda is the training update with Director Shannon Kirschberg.
Hi.
Hey. Okay. Warm.
There you go. Good evening. My name is Shannon Kirchberg. I'm the Director of Emergency Management and Workplace Safety, and I'm here to give you an update on our Emergency Operations Center training that concluded today. So, just a real brief overview. I will be going over this next week for the full council, but this class is part of our Emergency Operations Center building that is up at the Fire Station 67 in partnership with South King Fire. And we continue to build our preparedness with our city manager's commitment to emergency management, and of course with our city council's commitment as well. So our Emergency Operations Center was in the planning stages pre-COVID, and it was sped up and expedited once COVID was declared an emergency locally and nationally. We were able to fully equipped an EOC up at the fire station by April 2nd and stood it up and staffed it until July, when we had the mask mandate that came down and social distancing was put forth, so we went virtual instead of meeting face-to-face in the EOC. With the stabilization of COVID, we have had an opportunity to increase training of our EOC staff. So we had 10 members of our City of Des Moines staff, 13 members from the City of Buren's EOC staff, and we had guaranteed 30 people for the training, so we were able to open it up to some additional partners. One was Bruce Blair with our ham radio club, was able to come and participate and get some EOC training. Highline College, they sent their emergency manager as well as one from JBLM and another from Tacoma that needed it as a prerequisite for an additional training course. So this is the long description that FEMA gives this training. Basically, it orients the people that would be working in the EOC to what an EOC does. And what an EOC is we manage information from all different channels, bring it in, analyze it, and put it out in a clear, concise message to the community as well as incident command. And then we also source resources for incident command for whatever the big bad thing is that has happened that has incident command has directed the EOC to open. So if they're short on resources, then we search for those resources and bring them in and track them for them. So we don't do anything on the incident, and that's the key to this, is to let everybody know this is your role, this is your job, this is what we do. So the training started, it went all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday, and all day Thursday. I also brought you the book, and it's double-sided. So you can see it was a lot of information that was covered in 3 days. So they walk you through what an EOC is, the staffing solutions that align to individual skill sets. The City of Des Moines, we align in an ISM style, so that everybody that the job in the EOC is mirrored more like what they do on an everyday basis. We don't break out in ICS style because if you remember from your ICS training, ICS can be a foreign language. So we try and keep everybody doing a similar role that they do to their everyday job. So during training, they work on a scenario, and it starts out as a freight derailment, and they continue to add injects into it to make it a more complex incident so that the team learns how to expand the EOC in a complex incident, and then also how to decrease the staffing and how to close out an EOC and move into recovery mode. So our next steps, I gave you an example of our position task book that is a draft for the EOC director. So our next step would be to distribute all the different position task books throughout the EOC. They're all in draft form. We worked with Pierce College last year to develop these. So the EOC team, the emergency management team, will be coming together and looking at all of those task books together, making sure that they make sense for us and our EOC, and working on training that each individual will need to go through in order to be checked off on their position. And we'll go through position-specific training. We have a tabletop exercise that has been developed as well as a full-scale exercise. And we plan to go through all of that this year. We had this training at Wesley. They were an incredible host, so we want to make sure and thank Wesley for their hospitality. Washington State Emergency Management Division hosted the sign-up on their website, so everybody is getting accreditation for the class. Everybody passed. Sarah Miller and Lenora were our two FEMA instructors, and they were wonderful. It was a lot of talking and a lot of learning, but I believe it was a great class, and everybody enjoyed it. Questions?
No, I don't have any questions, but again, I am just sitting here so proud of how far the city's come, how far you and with Michael's support have taken emergency management, how much it is now integrated into the fabric of the city, and it's a change of culture, and that's huge, and I'm just really proud of that.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Dick said. I think it's really amazing what our little city has accomplished, and I think that's a testament to you and everybody else that's worked on this.
Well, and
So-
Patty as well, because
and
Patty started this way
Yes.
back, and she's been amazing to work with. So.
So, anyway, I think it's,
Well, in my comment, I'm so impressed. What did you say? Burien College, Des Moines, somebody from JBLM, Tacoma.
Tacoma.
The leadership here, this is incredible. It's like people are looking to us because your investment and your commitment to this. So Shannon, thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, well, that is the last item on our agenda tonight, unless you have any comments or want to bring anything else forward for discussion, either one of you? All right, meeting adjourned, thank you.